All right. Today on the show, we have
Uh-huh.
screenwriter and novelist Jennifer Manocherian, and her first book just came out called Alphabet. So we're going to talk to her a little bit about that, as well as other things that she's done throughout her life.
Okay. Well, my book is my first book written in my, I'm kind of the grandma Moses of screen of novelists. I'm well past 70 and but it's something I've always loved to write. And so it's kind of the culmination of many careers that I've had. Um, and it's also driven, I would say, more than anything else, COVID gave me the opportunity to write it because I was at home. And at the
Hmm.
time, I was a theater producer, mainly a theater
Oh,
producer. And so during that time, theater just basically came to a halt.
oh, right.
And I had an office in New York, and our office was the governor closed all non-essential businesses, and theater was non-essential. And so, anyhow, I was home and I used the time. In fact, it was a very productive time for me. But you mentioned that I had done a number of things in my life, which
Hmm.
it all kind of, now we're talking about the latter end of it, where I was doing theater. I was producing theater for maybe over 30 years, and I got my pinky in my little toe in the door still. I don't know where it scores, but I've gotten much more into wanting to be more creative in writing. And this year, not only did I write a novel or get my novel published, but I also a screenplay that I had been writing for years, a million different drafts, and trying to make it happen based on a novel I had optioned in 2014. So
Oh,
now we're talking about a 9-year process. The movie was finally filmed this year and it's in post production, and we're hoping to hit the festival circuit next year.
oh,
So it's,
fantastic.
yeah, so that was something, but that was also on hold during COVID. It was a strange time, but a time of opportunity for me. But since I was when I was in my 20s, or even when I was in school and we were talking, wanting to go to college, women at that time were not career oriented. It wasn't, it just,
Hmm.
there were women who had to work. I'm really talking about people who had the choice.
Right.
While I went to good schools, I went to private school, then I went to Barnard and dropped out like an idiot. But no, I don't regret things. So I take that back because life is a journey and everything's kind of part of a process to
Yeah,
me.
exactly.
So,
And look at everything you've done.
so by the time I was 27, I'd had mono at 19, 2 cases of hepatitis, and 4 children
Good grief.
in about a 9-year period.
That's like a whole life just crammed into there.
Oh, and I forgot I had a nephew living with us. So I had like 5 kids. And I was very young, but I look at pictures of myself and I'm either pregnant and smiling, or holding a baby, or there's a cat somewhere in the picture, or a dog, or I had a very domestic life and it was a happy life.
Hmm.
But then when the women's movement came along, I don't know, it spoke to me. I always knew there was something I needed. There was not totally going to be satisfied being at home. And I think my mother was always had a lot of drive. I mean, a lot of drive and ambition and a lot of energy, which is what I really attribute to my being able to do so much at my age. I just think it's in my DNA. I just got lucky. I got that kind of energizer bunny in me. Um,
Yeah, it sounds like you grew up in a really supportive household, though, for even pursuing those ambitions. I mean, just having them alone and having them validated, and then also being
well,
able to pursue them.
well, I have to kind of contradict you because I was the rebel in the family. I was the middle
Oh,
sister.
we like
And
that.
yeah. My father was a real intellectual, and he let you know it. I mean, there was nothing he thought you could possibly know that he didn't already know, and he let you know that. And dinners. We sat around the dinner table. My older sister she was 6 years ahead of me in school, and a very good student. And she and my father would be like quoting Wordsworth or something. And here I was 8 and, putting peas under the table for the dog. I, I couldn't compete. And so I rebelled, and I just was kind of the flaky one in the family. And, everybody would be sitting around reading and I would be on my bike going and finding my friends. So it really wasn't until I was in my teens and I actually actually, I went away from home to boarding school.
Oh.
And somehow I think getting away and feeling like not the pressure of needing to compete.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that of course, I didn't see it in those terms, but looking back, I think probably that's the factor. But I started to find what really interested me, and I finally started to realize I wasn't quite as dumb as I thought I was, and I started to really get very involved in writing and reading and just learning and curiosity. And I did a switch. I didn't become a total intellectual, but I mean, I had such the background that I had, it kind of seeded within me somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like growing up and Sundays, my father would always listen to the Philharmonic, and we would all supposed to listen to it. And I would be like, dying of boredom. And today I go to chamber music concerts. So, it all kind of sunk in, even though at the time nobody would have thought so.
It does seem like it's had a full circle feel or application in your life now that you say that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate it. I mean, I really appreciate all that I was exposed to, because it was a lot. And even though I was a nonconformist and pretended not to care, it all sunk in somehow anyhow. And
has any of this family background influenced your writing at all? Not even necessarily your novel, but with the screenwriting or even producing?
It's not like a linear connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I mean, but this is, again, I go to after my parents died, and I don't think anything was ever thrown away. So when I went through my mother's apartment, the things I found were unbelievable. They had both written screenplays. They'd both tried to write novels. It just seems to be something in our system.
Mm-hmm.
One of my sisters has it too. And, I think of it now as the writing gene. It's like, I write often to kind of clarify my own head, to get my thinking straight and everything. And I also am I think in terms of story.
Mm-hmm.
I see stories everywhere. I mean, it's just how my brain works.
Oh, I love that.
And I also feel like, to be a writer that's always, then we go to the definition. What is a writer? Is it somebody who publishes, or is it somebody who writes? Yeah. Well, I'm not going to get into that, because people feel very differently about it. And it's very hard for me to own the word writer. Being a writer often means being an observer. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's something about writers where, for whatever reason, they kind of are looking in the window rather than being in the room. And I've always, I guess, studied character, because the basics to me of all writing is understanding character.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah, you can't really write well if you don't have if you don't really know your characters.
Yeah, because everything else hinges upon that character, everything they do, everything that occurs.
Yeah, I mean, plot follows character. I mean, until you know them, you don't know what it is they want, what they want to do,
or why they're doing what they do,
how they dress.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I've done many things in my life. I mean, aside from having a large family, I've had so many chapters of my life, between being a family member, then I was a therapist, a divorce mediator, then I got involved with, a couple of other things I did along the way, but they're not as much. I mean, I had a career because I had a profession. Mm-hmm. And then I just did this leap off a bridge, suicidal bridge, kamikaze bridge, into becoming a theater producer. I walked away it was never something I didn't like doing. I have to say, being on a board with a bunch of lawyers trying to create bylaws for a new organization, maybe that's part of what kicked me out of the field. It was very frustrating. I mean, it was really tough being with a lot of lawyers, but I was the president-elect, and I couldn't wait to be in charge and kind of have control of meetings.
Still, that's a huge jump from that to a theater producer. I mean, how do you go from one to the other?
Well, it was really a very challenged time in my life. It was something in my head. It was like this fairy tale fantasy, as maybe all the kids today, it's like they have their Barbie, fantasies. Right. But for me, I don't know. It was just like, there was something that had me always kind of fantasize about being in entertainment business without any real understanding of what it involved. But an opportunity came to me. And I made a decision at the same time. My youngest child, who was around 13, 14 at the time, felt like she wanted to be in the city, and we got an apartment in the city. It was not a good move for us in any way, shape, or form. And we ultimately got rid of the apartment, and we're back where we are outside of the city.
And then from
Now,
there, you moved into screenwriting, right? Or
well, no, I stuck with the theater. I
okay.
really did, and I produced. I I had a partner. I was producing. The first show I did was uh, it was a Broadway show, and I was a co-producer.
Hmm.
And I was like a fly. I asked if I could be like a fly on the wall in the producer's office as part of my deal, where I would just listen and come to meetings and just learn. It was like, I don't recommend this for anybody. It's not the way you learn how to do something like this, because the theater, it would have been, it's much better to get some kind of real educational training. So
Mhm.
I'm not recommending the path I took, but it's the path I took. And I'm a do-it-yourselfer. So the play was unfortunately closed within a few days of opening. And it was a tough experience, but you put so much hope into something. But at that point, I felt like, all right, what's next? So I started looking for a project to do on my own. And I did. I produced a play, and it actually thinking back now, it had an extraordinary cast. Again, a play that unfortunately did not get well reviewed, and it closed. And then I did another play with another off-Broadway play called Hello Mother, Hello Mother, Hello Father, based on the Alan Sherman musical. And we had a good run on that. But anyway, I figured I just couldn't imagine going back and getting a PhD or a better master's. I just wasn't up to it. So I couldn't go back. I just didn't see there was any point in going. So I just kept going forward. And then I started writing kind of as moonlighting.
Mhm.
And the first movie I wrote actually with one of my sons, and it's on Amazon Prime Video, called Family Blues.
Okay.
And we did that in the mid-90s. It has a good cast. It has Polly Draper, Jane Krakowski, a bunch of Lois Smith. It's got a bunch of really well-known theater names, and some of them are television and movie names. And well, Jane Krakowski's had quite a career.
Yeah. She's
She
been
left
blown
our
up.
set to go do Ally McBeal. She virtually left the set on her way to California to do that. And she's done an amazing job. But that was our first film, and it was trial by fire. I was a producer on it, and it was exhausting. But I wasn't ready to do another one for quite a while. But I kept writing, and in any event, I got more engaged in producing, and I was involved in a lot of different shows producing, and a lot of people think of the glamour of theater and how exciting it must be,
Right.
and
Yeah.
basically it's a very tough business to ever make any money. It's like 1 in 5 shows fails.
That's kind of like writing, though, if you want to compare the two, like your chances of landing an agent, your chances of being picked up, your chances of living off your writing alone. I think you can sort
Well,
of
there's one
compare the
little
two.
difference. You're not and when you're writing, you're not losing $1 million for other people. When you're in
True.
when you're in theater and you're producing, you're asking and you're raising money. You're either putting in money or you're raising money. That's very risky money.
I
And
hadn't thought about that.
yeah, it's tough. I mean, one of the first shows I did, actually, where I had a very small role and I still make money from it, and that's Stomp, because it's still running across the country. I mean, Stomp has been a phenomenon. I mean, it paid my rent for a long time.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, but there aren't very many Stomps out there. I mean, I've had a number of success. I learned a lot about the business over the years, but the business changed. It
Hmm.
really changed. And I think part of what changed was 9/11, when all of a sudden, from people going to buying, planning, you bring your family to New York a year in advance and you buy your tickets and something. New York was kind of dead for a while, and people didn't buy in advance, and they started offering discounts. And it just changed the financial aspect of it. And more people had to be involved in order to raise money for a show. And as a result of it, you had less and less involvement. So it became less and less interesting to me as the years went by, and I started wanting to be more creative. So one of the things, there are a couple of things that I've done in theater. I've written the book of a couple of musicals, and then screenplays. I mean, I like to try different forms, and I don't know what I can do, and
Well,
I'm not afraid to fail. Let's put it that way. That's probably one of the things that's made it easiest for me to be doing the things I do, because if I do something and it doesn't work, then okay, I tried, and then I move on.
that's good advice.
And
I mean, I think lots of people would benefit just from having that same mindset. So if we move from that to your novel, what differences were there for you in the writing process between writing
oh,
screenplays versus the novel?
well, the answer is it was hard. First, I didn't know if I could. Creating character is something that's just kind of ingrained in me. A lot of it from my experiences, professionally and personally. And in terms of screenwriting, I feel like I can write dialogue. I mean, well, I know I can. And writing a novel is so different. And so not knowing if I could write a novel, I started about 8 or 9 years ago. A friend of mine was giving a course in a local library, just 2 hours every 2 weeks, just on writing, story writing. And I joined the group, and I'm still in it, and I love it. And because I wanted to find out if I could write narratively. I really wasn't sure if I could even write a 500-word piece that made any sense and had its own arc. And so I started, I don't know, through one of the prompts I had, I created this character, and then I started creating other characters. And then the group of writers I was also teaching, and I'm still teaching privately, but at the time I was teaching screenwriting at the Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute.
Oh,
And a bunch of us got involved kind of as a group together. And every summer we go away for a week somewhere and we write together.
how
And we
fun.
just write. It's just wonderful. And we write. I mean, it's just an amazing immersion in what you're doing. And so through these week-long things, I started to kind of come up with the idea of putting a bunch of characters together, somehow tying it all together. And then COVID rolls around, and it was very hard work. So what is the difference? The difference is that when you're screenwriting, you set up a scene with a short narrative thing as to who's in the scene, and what are we seeing, and basics, just basic as to what's going on, what are we going to be looking at, and who are we going to be seeing, and
Right.
what little things do we know about them. So and so, a faded actress from the 50s, just a short character description, but not in detail.
Mhm.
And then the camera also helps you. The camera
Yeah,
does a
having
lot
that
of work for
visual,
you.
right.
Yeah, I mean, the camera does so much for you, and you really have to learn how to really be sparing. I mean, everything and every word in a screenplay has got to be chosen. There's nothing gratuitous. You can't go to a restaurant and think something was hilarious and figure out, oh, how am I going to plop that into my story?
Right.
It doesn't work that way. It goes, if you have something funny, it has to be generated and have a reason for being there. So it's a the economy of it is very spare, and you have to be really, scenes are short, and each scene has to have its own arc, and it's once you get the hang of it, it's not so hard, but it's very spare. I'm not being very articulate
Oh,
about
yeah, I can see what you mean. So, just as a comparison from something I do myself, I edit children's books.
it. Uh-huh.
Very much the same thing where you have that visual cue to help guide you along in the
Yeah,
story. And there's so much that can be said visually that would take thousands of words to try and express it if you had text only.
right.
So,
So I
yeah,
mean,
that shift
so
from
when
no
I
longer
checked it,
having that.
yeah, my earlier draft of my novel, people would say it would read like a play. Well, okay, now I know, I've
Right.
got to really cut back I've got to really figure out how to create the scene. I mean, I have one of the people in my writing group used to work for mattress company, and she learned how to describe them, and I don't know how many ways. And when she does her writing, I mean, that experience has helped inform her. So she really, really takes you into that scene. But with her writing, I mean, I'd be talking about you with your glasses and you touched your hair, as we said, such and such. I mean, I had to learn that process of really showing the person where they were. And so one of the things that in my novel I have done, the novel takes place over the course of one day. And one of the things I did, which made it probably easier for me for that novel, and hopefully I can use in my next novel, which will not be the same, is that I have 7 different points of view. And so when I went to different points of view, I don't know that I could have done my first novel all from one point of view. Figuring out how to do it would have been really hard. Right. But because it was all different points of view, all the people that are part of that 24-hour period are aligned in some way. It's about an old lady who wakes up one morning and kind of in a mysterious to everybody way makes a decision to have a dinner party that night. And she's also invites a medium to the dinner party. So right, it's a very well, we're not going to give it away, but it's not. But it's like her daughter, her great granddaughter, her 2 of her neighbors, her housekeeper, and her night aide, because she's in a wheelchair. And so during that course, and they're all quite different. They're different in age. It has an age span of probably 60 years at least, or 70 years over the guests at the party, and it also they're different ethnicities. Different points of view.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, like her great granddaughter is half Korean. And so, I mean, it's just so that everybody, you get to know what everybody's issues are leading up to that dinner party, where a lot has to happen over the course of the dinner party.
Sounds very Agatha Christie-esque.
Well, it's compared a lot also to Virginia Woolf, the book she does with the dinner party. And I'm blanking on the title right now, but it's not that dinner party, and hopefully it's not the same. But it was, in fact, the hardest chapter was the one of the dinner party, because I did it through the point of view of the old lady. Her name is Bet. The title is Alphabet, Bette. And the reason, and a lot happens with all the different characters in that one, but I felt initially I wrote it where in the dinner party, it was all different points of view, and it became very choppy, and it didn't really, I had to make it all from her point of view, where she sees things and hears things. So that's quite a different process from screenwriting. It's just, it's a different craft. It really is. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it's like fools rush in. I as I said, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I love to learn to do things. And that's kind of what I did.
Well, leading into our last question before we close, and touching on that your book does utilize all these different points of view, do you have any advice for writers on how to do that? How do you switch from one perspective to another while capturing each of those individual voices?
The answer is with difficulty. No.
Well, that's a great answer.
No, it's actually kind of a challenge, because everybody has to have his or her own voice, and you have to be able to distinguish them. But it's in a way, it's kind of, I don't know. I'm going to say it's easier, and maybe because I'm not an experienced novelist, I'm wrong. But get me as an opportunity to tell a new story, to go into something new. So it's not like I have to keep building and building on the life of the old lady, right?
Yeah, that's
so now I get into the life of the young Croatian housekeeper, night aide, and her life in Croatia. So it was, I had to do research. I mean, and I also I was very aware of, there's been a lot of backlash against appropriation. And I actually took out 2 characters because of it. And, there's no matter how you write, you're going to be appropriating. So, I mean, you can't write a book that's all about one character who's your age, ethnicity, you do it a little, but you try to do it respectfully and with authenticity. So I did do some changes in that regard. And then there's one character I wrote that's going to be the basis of my next book, which I'm
Are they
working
in
on.
this first one?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Actually, three of them are probably going to be in it. But it's definitely, there's a next door neighbor who's like the most fun writing of all, because she's really nasty. And there's one of the prompts I remember getting was to write about a dislikable person. And, we all want to be liked. It's hard to write about somebody who's really nasty, but you've also got to feel like you've got to see their humanity too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so much fun doing that. So she's going to be the basis of my next book.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Well, I'm having fun doing it.
Thank you again. I was so nice. It was really nice having you here. And
thank you. My pleasure.
Even just hearing about the influence of your family life and all these other influences you've had that all led to this.
It is. That's one word I think about with life. Process. Everything's a process. You cannot get from A to Z without going through all the alphabet.
Yes. Well said. That should be our tagline.